Today, if you turn to page 18, we will be studying the order of operation. Now, the order in which we do things in math is very important, and he gives a really good example on page 18 with this problem, 2 plus 5 times 3. Now, on the left-hand side, we're going to add first, and on the right-hand side, we're going to multiply first. So if we add first, we're going to be left with 7 times 3. And if we multiply first, we're going to have 2 plus 15. Well, 7 times 3 is 21, but 2 plus 15 is 17. And 17 is the correct answer. So if we're going to get our problems right, we need to know the order of operation. And the order of operation is called PEMDAS. Often remembered with the phrase, "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally." Now the P stands for parentheses. The E stands for exponent. The M and D stand for multiplication and division. The A and the S stand for addition and subtraction. In other words, the proper order of operation is parentheses first, then exponent, then multiplication and division, then addition and subtraction. As you can see here, we failed to follow those rules and we got the wrong answer. Here, we did the multiplication before the addition and we got the correct answer. Now, without getting too involved in mathematical philosophy, understand that multiplication and division are essentially the same function, just like addition and subtraction are essentially the same function. So when we have multiplication and division, we perform the function from left to right. And when we have addition and subtraction, again, we perform the function from left to right. So we have 30 divided by 3 times 2. And if we perform the multiplication function first, we are going to get an incorrect answer. So let's solve this moving from left to right. 30 divided by 3 is 10, and times 2 is 20, and that is the correct answer. Now let's look at some parentheses. The first set of parentheses that you see we call parentheses. The next set of parentheses that you see are called brackets. And the last set of parentheses you see are called braces. Now they all perform the same function, but they tell you which is the most inner parentheses, and the most inner parentheses is where we do our first work. Now in a problem like this, it's easy to get the answer wrong, not because it's difficult, but because there are so many places to make a mistake. Now the place where we're going to start is at the innermost parentheses. You know the innermost parentheses because they're the actual parentheses themselves, not the brackets, not the braces, but the parentheses themselves. -1 has taken care of itself, at least for right now, and there is a function to be performed at the parentheses next to that. That would be 3 squared plus 1. And we need to perform the function of the exponent first. 3 squared means 3 times 3, and that would be 9. Following PEMDAS, we have gone to the innermost parentheses. We have done the exponent. There's nothing to multiply, so now we're going to add. And that would be 10. And since we've done everything in the innermost parentheses, let's bring it out by multiplying 4 times the 10. Now the innermost parentheses is the bracket, so let's perform the function within the bracket. That would be 32 minus 40. Now we have no more functions to perform on the innermost parentheses, which is the bracket. So let's multiply the bracket times the number that is next to it. That would be -7. -7 times -8 is positive 56. And our numbers are starting to get a little far away from each other, so let's bring them closer together. Now the innermost parentheses is the -1. -1 times 56 is -56, and the next function to be performed within the brace is 8 squared. Now, in the book, you'll see that he does 8 squared a couple of steps before I do, but that's fine. We're still following the proper PEMDAS protocol. 8 squared is 64, that is to say 8 times 8. And 64 minus 56 is 8, and we have performed all the functions within the brace. So let's bring it out of the brace, and it will be 8 times 2, which is 16, and that is your answer. Now let's perform some functions on a fraction bar. Now I do this in a different order than Mr. Wallace does. If you do it his way or my way, you will get the correct answer. But I like to treat the numerator and denominator as two different functions. And so I solve for the numerator first, and then I'm going to solve for the denominator. Now the parentheses is complete in the numerator, so we're going to perform the exponent first. The exponent is 2 to the 4th. That would be equivalent to 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. That is 2 multiplied times itself 4 times, which is what the exponent means. And we have 16. So we have 16 minus negative 8 times 3. And since we have a multiplication function there, let's perform that first. Now the negative outside of parentheses can be treated as negative 1. So what we have is negative 1 times negative 8 times 3. So we can multiply 3 times negative 8 first, or we can multiply the negative times negative 8. And that's what I like to do, move left to right. So negative 8 is positive 8, and now we have 16 plus 8 times 3. Of course, we performed the multiplication function first before addition. And we have 24, or 16 plus 24, which of course would be 40. And that is the solution for our numerator. Now on the denominator, we have 15 divided by 5 minus 1. Let's perform the division function first, and that would be 3. 3 minus 1 is 2, and that is the solution for our denominator. Now we have a fraction that is 40 over 2, or a division problem, whichever way you want to look at that. 40 over 2, or 40 divided by 2, is 20, and that is the solution to this problem. Now let's look at a function that uses absolute value. Absolute value is the value of a number without regard to its sign. So you might say that it's 10 miles to Walmart and it's 10 miles back. That's not positive 10 there and negative 10 back, because then you'd be traveling 0 miles when in fact you know that you've traveled 20 miles. So on this number line, you would see whether you travel 4 spaces to your right or 4 spaces to your left, you've traveled 4 spaces. Now if you've traveled 4 spaces to the left, you've traveled negative 4 on the number line. If you've traveled 4 spaces to your right, you've traveled 4 spaces on the number line. So you've traveled 4 whether you've headed in the negative direction or the positive direction. So that's why we use absolute value. And when you see the sign for absolute value, just know that you need to negate whatever sign is in there. If it's a negative sign, the answer is positive. If there's a positive in there, the answer is positive. It's positive no matter what when you bring that number out of the absolute value bars. Now in this problem, we have 2 functions that are within absolute value bars. We have one on the left and we have one on the right. And just to be consistent, we'll start with the one on the left. It doesn't really matter, but we're going to start with the one on the left. And that is negative 4 squared. Now, that exponent only applies to the thing it's next to. So it only applies to the 4. It does not apply to the negative. 4 times 4 is 16, which leaves you with a negative 16. And in the parentheses, we have negative 8. On the outside of the parentheses, we have a negative. So that's going to be negative 1 times negative 8, which is going to be positive 8, which leaves us with negative 16 plus 8, which is negative 8, and we've completed the function in the absolute value bars on the left-hand side. Now let's move to the absolute value bars on the right-hand side. The first thing that we have in there, or the last thing that we have in there, but the first function we're going to perform is the exponent. The exponent is next to a parentheses. Now, what is that exponent next to? The exponent is 2, or we say squared, but what is it next to? It is not next to the 5. If you're looking for a number, it is not next to the 5, it is next to the parentheses, which means that exponent is going to be applied to everything inside that parentheses. Now everything inside this parentheses is negative 5. So it's going to be applied to the negative, and it's going to be applied to the 5. Now negative 5 times negative 5 is positive 25. Or you could say 5 times 5 and negative times negative. Either way you get positive 25. So within the absolute value bars on the right-hand side, we have 3 plus 25. And that is 28. Now let's remove the absolute value bars by turning them into parentheses. And negative 8 is going to be positive 8, and 28 is going to remain 28. Now the left parentheses is 8, and we're going to multiply it times 3, 24. And the multiplication on the right-hand side is going to be 2 times 28, which is 56. Now we have 3 simple numbers to add. Let's add 1 plus 24. That's 25. And 25 plus 56 is 81. Now you've completed the third lesson in this series, and the homework problems are on page 21.